Hello everyone, and welcome to our panel discussion on the importance and benefits of choosing an experienced and licensed electrical contractor for your EV charging installations. I'm Nino, Cara, the President of Electrical Autonomy Canada, and I'm delighted to be moderating today's discussion, which is sponsored by the Electrical Contractors Association of Ontario and the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers. For many people, property managers, condo boards and businesses, organising the installation of EV chargers is a new experience. And before you make a decision about what equipment you're going to buy and where you're going to install them, there's important information to learn in advance. And that's what this discussion today is all about. Sharing insights that will help you reduce your cost risk and your safety risk when installing these important pieces of equipment by using a suitably experienced and licensed electrical contractor. A quick bit of housekeeping before we get started. A recording of this session will be made available after the event at electricalautonomy.ca. And if you have questions, please add them in the Q&A section and we'll get to as many of them as we can. And you can add your questions as we're running through the conversation. So let's meet our panel. So if I can invite our panelists to turn their cameras on. And first of all, I'd like to introduce you to Terry Ferster, Property Manager at Crossbridge Condominium Services, Melissa Young, Executive Director at the National Electrical Trade Council, and Mark Marmer, Founder and Owner at Signature Electric. Welcome everybody. Thanks for joining us today. Really looking forward to the discussion. And if it can just kick off by just inviting each of you to share a little about your role and your organisation. And Mark, perhaps you might like to kick us off.
Sure, thanks, Nino. I appreciate being invited to take part. We're, as you alluded to at the beginning, we're a licensed electrical contractor here in the Greater Toronto Area. We've been in business about 36 years now, and probably over the last 8 or 9 years, we've developed quite an expertise in amongst other things, in electric vehicle charging. Our connection in this particular case with Terry being here, our connection with the condos in advance made us a sort of a good mix for that, and we do other service for them as well. So just sort of a bit of background.
Thanks, Mark. Terry, would you like to go ahead?
Yes, thank you, Nino. My name's Terry Ferster. I've been a longtime property manager for the last 35 years. And happy to say that I work for Crossbridge Condominium Services. And we did undertake a project to install electric vehicle charging in our condominium. So I'd be here to answer any questions and help with some of the information.
Terrific. Thanks for joining us. And Melissa, over to you.
Thanks. Melissa Young, Executive Director of the National Electrical Trade Council. NETCO is a jointly sponsored organization of the IBEW and the Canadian Electrical Contractors. So we are also the organization that holds the rights for the training program for electrical vehicle charging station installation for Canada.
Great, and we look forward to hearing a bit more about that in the conversation today. So Mark, perhaps you can kick us off by talking about some of the less obvious factors that property managers need to consider beyond just the EV charger itself, because obviously, you know, you see these charging units and you think, right, okay, well, we need one of those, let's get one of those, but it's not as simple as that piece of hardware, is it?
No, once you start to get in, you're correct. Once you start to sort of get past a home charger is pretty straightforward. We bring power to it, we're paying our own electricity, and it's pretty straightforward. We just plug it in. But when you start to get into a shared environment, whether it's like Terry's building, whether it's a condominium, or it might be a workplace, or it could be a business, a store, any of these things. Now we're talking about how are we going to manage to get paid back for the electricity, who's going to pay for what, how are we going to manage to serve the whole community in the case of a condominium, what kind of panels are we going to need, what placements are we going to need of these panels. There's back-end software that goes with it. The chargers are network chargers, so meaning they communicate with the internet to be able to do things like provide security, and this collection of energy. And the other thing that we want to do, particularly in almost all the sites, is carefully use the electricity that we have. So we want to have some type of power sharing arrangement so that that we can have, you know, with these places, pretty much everybody just has only so much electricity to go around. And if we could use this as carefully and judiciously as possible, then we'll use that leftover electricity to serve as many people. There's ultimately a call comes here. It's usually very vague. Somebody's interested, the board's interested, and we delve in to find out what it is they need. A lot of this is education as well, and you know, that happens at the beginning and sometimes at the end. An electrical contractor who's familiar with this type of an installation, everybody has their specialties. You probably don't find us too much working in people's homes. We just don't do a lot of it, but we're really good at this. And we can go out to the market, find the pieces that are needed to find the right solution for a client, whether it's like Terry in a condo, or whether it's somebody perhaps, as I mentioned before, in maybe a workplace or a whole variety of settings. Now we're starting to see fleets coming around. Fleets need a special type of treatment and not the same kind of charges that he's getting. So, you know, these are some of the pieces that we're in a great position to be able to provide.
And so can you speak, Mark, a little bit about the rationale for why it makes sense to speak to an electrical contractor first, and the kind of convening role that an electrical contractor has in bringing all those bits together that you were just referencing, rather than trying to approach kind of like really one of those services?
Sure, because I think it sometimes seems obvious to people that if I'm getting a charger, I should just reach out to a charger manufacturer. So then I look and there's 3 or 4 charger manufacturers, or 15 or whatever it is. But bear in mind that these are good manufacturers most of the time, providing excellent product. But they have this product to sell and to promote. And it may be the perfect product for your place, but what happens if it's not the perfect product? What happens if something else in the market might be the right way to go? And then they have this product. Perhaps it's a network charger and it needs some kind of back end. Well, there's several back end, a number of back end providers. They're not necessarily helping you with that. So it just makes it, by the time sometimes these boards come to us, they're having a really challenging time finding the right way in to get the answers. And sometimes it's amazing. After a 15 or 20-minute conversation, I can feel the sigh. I can feel the concern being lifted off their shoulders. They think they found the right solution. And what I like to say is, I think I know where you're going to end up. Let me help you to drive you there directly. If you want to go a circuitous route to get there, that's your business. But I'm pretty sure I can drive you there directly. And you would be, frankly, even sometimes I'm quite surprised at how often that works just perfectly, and we're able to guide them and to where they need to be.
Cool, thanks, Mark.
Sure, no problem.
So Terry, you've been at the other end of this experience, and you've now got charges at your property.
That's true.
And so it'd be great to hear, you know, what the mirror image was like of that experience that Mark was talking about from your point of view.
Well, I think in many cases, if people are like me, a property manager in a building where there hasn't been charges, it's hard to gauge the interest from your owners, how many people would be interested. And considering the fact that the legislation said condo boards didn't have to actually consider an installation until there was a request to do so by one of the owners, then you know, maybe it's even dragged out even longer and you don't have enough information. In our case, it was actually one individual who came forward with a request, and this although we'd been looking at the EV chargers for a couple of years prior to, and started doing all the documentation and paperwork we needed to with our lawyer, we didn't really have an understanding of the interest. But when we started to get the request, when we got the first request, we pushed forward with getting the EV charger system that we thought would best suit this building and the needs of the building. One of the other factors of consideration was the physical layout of the building, and you know, if there was space for community chargers, if there was ample visitor spots that could be utilized in that sense as a community charger, which we just didn't seem to have. And the board didn't feel they wanted to unnecessarily block some visitor parkings where they're limited to begin with. So it was a journey, and I'm sure it's going to be a different journey for everybody. However, just to let you know, to answer the question a little more specifically, the original person who requested it and forced us to go through with the whole process actually didn't accept the costs of the charging system. So they backed out, although we were already involved in getting it installed. So ultimately, only 4 people took advantage of that. And to date, only 4 people have it right now.
So it's interesting that others in the building actually were making the transition themselves, even though they weren't the initial proposers.
Yeah, I think if anyone's aware of the ZVIP program by the government to rebate some of the new installations that are going to happen now after they've announced the program, I can tell you that our electrical capacity was used up. We filled up all the spots once that had come out and people were aware of that. So now we're at capacity. So that's another issue.
And just for our audience, you referenced there, Terry, the excuse me, the ZEVIP program, which is the federal funding program, zero emission vehicle infrastructure program run by the federal government that offers 50% of funding towards EV charger installations.
Correct.
Right. Yeah, cool. And just for people that I believe that program's still open and available on the government website. Mm-hmm. Thanks, Terry. And could you speak a little about the, you know, how was it just being able to work with one contractor? As Mark's already said, you know, you actually worked with Signature Electric on this. How was, you know, was it relatively seamless? Did you have to do much interaction with the different vendors, you know, involved in bringing this together?
No, the first consideration any good property manager would have is to make sure you've got a properly licensed and insured contractor to do the work. I don't know how many people know Mark, but I've known Mark for a number of years in the condominium industry, and know he works closely in the condo industry, and that made him a good fit for us to help guide us through the process. It was seamless from beginning to end. Yes, there was an interruption in power in the building, which, you know, inconveniences owners from time to time and residents from time to time, but it only happened once, right? So I would say it was very painless, very painless.
It's good. Well, I'm always reassured to hear of a painless transition experience for anyone getting into the EV business. So that's good to know. So thanks, Terry.
You're welcome.
So, Melissa, it'd be great if you could explain a little about what it means for, about what it means for electrical contractor to be licensed, and the extra credentials that come with being obviously experienced and qualified in EV charger installations.
So I can speak a little bit about the need to use certified electricians, so those that actually carry certification in the occupation to work in that part of the industry. And of course, Mark's company is a licensed contractor. To be a licensed contractor, you must have registered apprentices or certified journey persons. Our electric vehicle infrastructure training program is an additional certification that specializes specifically in the installation of those charging stations. It covers several different manufacturers and models. However, it does go through a little bit extra than more what you could learn in trade school, because there's a little bit more involved with that. So if you have our certification at the end of the day, then you are considered qualified. You're qualified as an electrician. However, you're that much more qualified should you have your certification EVITP, because you've had the exposure to the other connections that are required for that, as well as the manufacturer necessities.
Great, thanks, Melissa. And Mark, there's clearly a lot to learn for a property manager deploying their first chargers. How much of your time is spent on the actual installation versus working with the property managers or the condo boards to help educate them? You touched on this earlier, that education is kind of like one of the cornerstones of what you have to do in this regard.
Yeah, I think this education piece is really critical. I'm telling you that when they come to us, and not just, we're talking, I know we've got the Terry here and we're talking about condos, but people come to us from all kinds of different situations, not just condos, and they have some vague idea of needing electric vehicle charging for whatever reason. We want to listen and then try to figure out how to apply an answer to that. So at a condo is even a little bit more complicated. Terry is managing the condo. He reports to a board of directors who are managing ultimately make the decisions about the condos on behalf of those that live there. So there's a lot of people to get information through to. You have to find a easy and concise way to get that through to them, and to sometimes simplify it and make them feel comfortable that they're understanding. So it may be even this week, I spoke to some boards who have yet to really engage with us, but they just are sort of looking through and asking questions different places. And then we'll get some engagement with them. We'll guide them through perhaps a load evaluation to try to get some engineered information about what's available in the building. Come and take a look and see what's needed. Inevitably, and I'm just actually frankly prefer it this way, once the quote arrives, I'll get a call, which I handled just even today, from a property manager. Walk me through this quote, I'm going to explain it to the board. And then they explain it to the board, and inevitably the board would like to speak to you because they've now come up with 15 other questions that it's just a bit much. At one time, we really didn't have to speak to these boards. When we weren't doing something as complex as EV charging, I simply explained to the manager what we were doing. They saw the quotes, they explained it, and we would, if we were lucky, we'd get a PO. Now it's needing more than that, and they're relying on us to help them through. Terry's got a lot of responsibilities in the condo, and if we can make his job easier and answer these questions, sometimes their interactions are 5 and 6 different interactions that happen. And I would say it's getting a little shorter now, but I would say the time frame from that first phone call to us actually being in the building doing something used to be about a year. I used to say if we could push them in the pipe at this end and wait a year, they'll just stop popping out the pipe at the other end. And it worked that way. And I enjoy this. I enjoy the education. This is a perfect opportunity for me to speak to a large number of people at one time and help to share that information. So I would say that it's a large component. That being said, an installation like Terry's, just the installation of the infrastructure and everything could take 2 or 3 weeks. So just to give you an idea of the time, we certainly spend, I hope, more time on site than I do trying to educate. But we want to be available, and that's the idea, right? We're talking about what's the value of an electrical contractor. These value adds are what makes the difference, right? That they know what they're talking about and they're sharing it. We have a whole video series that we share, and that video piece makes it easy for Terry to share with his board, and then they come semi-educated by the time they come. They've got way better and more high-end questions, and we're happy to handle those.
Thanks, Mark. So Terry, is somebody who's kind of in the middle, as a property manager, as somebody kind of in the middle of this exchange, and obviously working with condo boards very closely, what advice would you give to a property manager who's perhaps watching this, or somebody from a condo board who's actually thinking about kind of getting ready to enter into a conversation with a contractor? But what advice would you give based on your experience?
I think the advice I would possibly give is you better check references. Look at what they've done previously. Talk to those property managers or board of directors if you can, and see how their experience went. And that would be my greatest advice I could give. Right? Check the work.
Thanks, Terry. And just to take a specific example that is often faced in multi-unit buildings is whether to install a community chargers versus chargers installed in dedicated deeded slots or the dedicated parking stalls that the owners have. How did you address that situation in your work with your condo?
As I said, kind of in my opening, that we have a limited physical space. And we only had two possibilities. One was above ground outside the building in our contractor parking area, which is limited anyways to about 8 spots. And the other spots would be taken up in visitor parking. And the board just didn't feel it was the right thing to do to limit all the buildings owners by limiting parking spots even further than what they are currently, right? So we knew that community chargers were not the way to go in this building. And so we sought out a solution that was going to allow the maximum number of people to get a charger within the building personally.
And Mark, obviously, thank you, Terry. You know, having heard Terry's example, what's your advice when people come to you, you know, who perhaps haven't thought this out, and how do you help people weigh this up?
So in a condo, this is inevitably a question I will hear, because what's happened is that they've got this situation now that they want to install some electric vehicle charging. And there's going to be a cost involved in this, and it's the job of the manager and the board to control and manage the cost within the condominium. And they don't know really, is this going to be one person or is this going to be 20 people? We have condos with 20 chargers in it. So what will we do? So perhaps we can find something a little simpler to do. This idea of community charging, the idea that I'll put a couple of chargers in and people will share it. Well, for those of us that drive EVs, we understand that it's really important that the charger be available for us. So what will I do to begin with from the EV owner piece? If I come home and somebody's in where I was hoping to use my charger, what will happen? Is this person going to come down at 11 o'clock at night and move their car out? And the other thing that we look at is, ultimately, when we get the system installed, I don't want this to add to Terry's workload or to cause tension in the community. So, you know, this idea that somebody coming into Terry on Monday morning saying, look, I don't get it. You told me I was going to charge here. This person never seems to move their car. And now this has caused a new problem for Terry that he didn't have before. EV drivers are quite happy, generally speaking, to pay for what they need to pay for, put it in their spot. My charger's available 24 hours a day, and I can rely on it. And this is, frankly speaking, 98% of how we end up was in the deeded spaces. But I just want to bear in mind, and I know we're talking about condominiums here, this idea of a shared charger can work perfectly fine, and it could work possibly in a workplace, maybe or maybe not. It certainly could work outside of a Walmart or something of that nature, where, you know, I don't really plan to be there more than 2 or 3 hours anyways. So there, that type of thing can work well. And I can talk about the idea of having some kind of penalty to move somebody out of the space, because I get that they're only really going to be there 2 or 3 hours if that's what they came for. But to penalize people that are owners in a condominium, I think Terry's not going to enjoy the interaction that's going to happen after that. So, but you know what? This is all part of the education. The way that I'm explaining it to you is the way I explain it to them. And ultimately, frankly speaking, if after everything they decide that they want to try it, and we do have a couple of condos that are kind of doing this and almost managing, it's fine. We're an electrical contractor. We're happy to do it. I just want them to understand in the end what it is they signed up for and what they're going to get. And I want them to be, just like Terry, as he said, he's known me for a long time. I want you to be happy when the job's done. I truthfully, if it's not going to work out well and you're not going to be happy, maybe we shouldn't have done the job to begin with. It's a consideration, right?
Thanks, Mark. I can see we've got a bunch of questions coming through, so we're going to be taking questions from the audience shortly. So please do continue to put your questions in the Q&A panel. Melissa, for the electrical contractors who are tuned into this conversation, and you know, we know we've had good interest from obviously the community as well in this session. How would they go about getting qualified and building up their expertise in this field? You know, if they don't have experience, but obviously, you know, this is a growing area, and obviously we need more and more contractors to be qualified in the space. And how can they actually be, you know, get the benefit of some of the training work that NETCO and the Electrical Contractors Association of Ontario and the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers have been leading in this way?
So I guess, Nino, maybe I'll back it up a little bit to 2013, when the IBEW and SECA, being our founding partners of NETCO, had the foresight to see that this electric vehicle charging installation infrastructure was it was forthcoming. So we brought the program from the US to Canada in 2013, actually. and have been building on it since. So it is available right across the country at several of our local unions offer it for their contractors. However, if someone has a specific question about how to get involved in getting the training, you can direct that right to me through our NETCO website. We're currently building the new Canadian site. Hopefully it should be done in July. And on that site, if you are a contractor that does have qualified EVITP installers working for you, you'll be able to register on that site. And those that are looking for someone to do that installation, they'll be able to quickly find you as a contractor and contact you for a quote or whatever the case may be.
Great, thank you. Terrific. Right, well, we'll take some of the questions that have been coming through. First one is on cost control throughout the process. So cost control throughout the process is a challenge. It seems like the bill for getting chargers installed can get out of control. Is there an order of steps to go through that would help avoid unpleasant fee surprises? Are there additional fees for maintenance every year? So maybe take the first one, and then it'd be good to talk with Mark and Terry about the ongoing costs.
Do you want me to try it? I could try this.
Yeah. If you kick off the cost control throughout the installation.
No problem. It sounded like me. So to begin with, we're gonna get some information in place about, you know, how many chargers we can have and what have you. And ultimately, we're going to develop a quotation. When we provide a quotation to a customer, this is a firm quotation. Once Terry signs, we'll stand by whatever that was, and we'll make sure this job is done, that this is what you expect from a quality licensed electrical contractor. So there are no surprises from that perspective. And the same thing, even for the individuals, when we have a charger for an individual, particularly in a condominium, we provide a customized quotation for that person, closer to the panel, further from the panel, 1 charger, 2 chargers, whatever it is. And that person makes that decision based on exactly what the cost is. Ultimately, in a case of network chargers, there's somebody that's doing the billing, the tap card authentication. There's a third-party company that's doing this dynamic power management. They need to be paid. These fees, once they've managed to figure out who they're going to use, these fees are outlined, and the fees in the case of a condominium are paid for by the actual user, the owner of the station. And so again, no surprises. Maintenance is not really a very big issue. Truthfully, the items that we put in are not proprietary. There's nothing special about them. They're ordinary panels, the same as the panels that are in the building. They are the pipe and the wire is just the same pipe and wire that's in the building. The only thing that's a little bit special is this network charger. So that's really the only piece that really could go wrong. A charger should have a pretty decent warranty. Ours has a, you know, one of the ones that we use is like a 3-year warranty. So it's not and you know, those that have electric cars understand that our chargers are lasting a long time, and there's, you know, then we're not tending to have problems. But even if you did have a problem with it, it's just the charger that needs to be replaced. The panel, the wire, everything else, the bigger parts, the more expensive pieces, they're going nowhere. They stay anyway. So if a new charger came along, or a slightly better charger came along in 5 years, simply replace it. It's not an impossibility.
Thanks, Mark. And Terry, could you speak to the maintenance fees as you're experiencing it from your P&L?
Well, we haven't had any maintenance fees because we've only recently had the infrastructure installed, so there hasn't really been any maintenance at this point. And as far as the individual owners who have the chargers at this point, they haven't even activated their accounts because they don't have the vehicles at the moment. They're looking at it from a different standpoint as well, looking at it from the standpoint that it's enhancing their suite and the saleability of their unit. So, you know, they are planning to get one, but they haven't gotten it yet, and they haven't activated their accounts. So there have been no maintenance charges or any charges of any kind.
Okay, thanks, Terry. So a question here. I'm moving to a condo building under construction in Victoria. The contractor is putting in 2 chargers for 50 units. Is there a process for upgrading before we get possession?
Okay, so this is another story. Terry and Crossbridge tend to take care of buildings that are existing, and they manage existing buildings. This is a question about a developer. We deal with developers here quite regularly, and every building in every location. So here we have somebody calling from the West Coast. They have different rules, and here in Toronto, you'll find there's different rules. You'll find different developers. Some are looking, we have one that we called the other day. They've got enough panels and chargers to literally have something in every single space. I don't find that too often. So at the moment, you need to look into what was the arrangement in the closing documents. Most of them will have some that are already installed, and maybe you could buy one of those spaces, or they have some provision for X amount of money if you wanted one in your space. So this is something you really have to be looking at and asking. I mean, it's exactly what Terry alluded to. This person sees some value to buying a unit. They see some value in having a charger in their unit. Maybe they haven't quite bought the car yet, and they're wanting to know how much is that going to cost, and that's making this building more interesting than to another one. Maybe if the person went to a building where every space had charging in it, they would feel perfectly comfortable and see better value in that space. But in this case, at this early stage, they need to be speaking to the developer, because that's where they're at in the process.
Cool, thanks, Mark. Good, helpful insight. Terry, question for you. Did you look at other contractors to make your decision before you made your decision to use Signature Electric, and how did you pull that list together, if you did?
Definitely. I looked into, all the different people who were out there. I had a lot of people coming to me actually saying, do you want EV chargers? Because it's becoming more fashionable to have them, right? So a lot of companies are working at this as well. So I just felt more comfortable knowing Mark and having a prior relationship with him through ACMO and through CCI, that I know he was someone that I could trust and someone that I could count on to do the right thing. So it wasn't a sense of, anybody was worse or better, but I just felt more comfortable with Mark.
Cool. So a bit of a personal relationship and just prior knowledge helped you through that.
We've been working on this for a number of years, right? And all the information that was coming prior to was from Mark's company. So that was part of it.
Okay, terrific. Thank you. Melissa, are you obviously thinking about the growth in, obviously one of the big, I touched on it earlier, one of the big things about electric vehicle charging infrastructure is that it's a growing sector. We've got 3.5% EV adoption right now on average in Canada, but that's due to go up to 30%, to grow by tenfold by 2030. So there's going to be a huge increase in demand for charging infrastructure to be rolled out in all these places, as Mark was referencing earlier, and people to do it. To what extent are you concerned that there could be a trade deficit if people don't have the proper encouragement? If the trades don't have the proper encouragement and education in order to have the licensed contractor really handle these large scale kind of commercial installation of EV chargers?
We've already taken steps within our organization to expand our training focus. Specific to Ontario, we've recently signed a contract with the province there to expand our training programs to all sectors within Ontario, all regions, to all of our training centers. So between now and March 31st, we'll train an additional 400 certified electricians with the EVITP certification. And that's just through this program. That's not the ones that we train on a regular basis through our training providers that are out there. So we don't necessarily see that there's going to be a shortage. Our organizations are very proactive with what I would consider to be professional development post-certification for electricians. So like many other occupations out there, the skilled trades should still continue to do some type of professional development with new products and services that are available in their industry. And electric vehicle chargers are just that. They're a new product. They're still part of the electrical field. They require the electrical techniques to do the work under their scope of practice. However, it is a new product that's on the market. So training is necessary to really ensure the consumer that they're getting properly qualified individuals to the utmost, I guess, to the highest standard to do this installation in either their home, condo, commercial business, or whatever the case may be.
So thanks, Melissa. So really to clarify, then there's any licensed electrical contractor it does have the credentials to actually install EV chargers, because obviously they're qualified in that way. But obviously we're talking specifically here about the specific training and experience that we're looking to empower these contractors.
Exactly, and professional development is not often thought of in the skilled trades. The electrical industry the occupation is the only occupation in Canada that is regulated in every single jurisdiction. With that being said, it should be noted enough that professional development and lifelong learning is something that still needs to go on in the skilled trades. People don't normally think about that, and you look at someone that is an electrician or a carpenter, and you think it stops there, but it doesn't. There's always new products that are coming out on the market, and sometimes with some of those products, in order to even purchase them as a contractor, you must have the certification. Not necessarily with some of the charging stations, but there are some that you must show that you have this EVITP certification to even purchase some of the products that are out there that are relative to it.
We in our reporting at Electric Autonomy, we write a lot about obviously about the disruption that's happening with electric vehicles coming in, but also about the economic opportunities. And it's one of the areas that obviously people in the industry of servicing combustion vehicles, those jobs are going to gradually reduce. But the area where there is opportunity for jobs and new skills is obviously in this area, and actually helping with installations and gaining those credentials to handle these charging. So I think this is it's great to see that there's professional development programs already in place to help people really kind of get to a level that helps people installing this infrastructure have a good experience on the other end, as Terry has had. So great. So people are curious about, and if for anybody on the panel who might know this one, people are really curious about ways to access grants or funding. We spoke about the ZEVIT program already that Terry referenced. Are there any other routes to funding that are less well known that you can share information on? Is there any that anybody is aware of that will help?
Keep in mind, this relates to some extent to where you are in the country. There was, to begin with, that across the country we have a grant, a $5,000 grant for actually purchasing the electric vehicles below a certain amount. You'll find on the West Coast and some of the provinces are coming up with grants for various things to do with the cars, or to do in some case with the infrastructure. The ZVIP program that we talked about is something that's ongoing. We're in the third year of 5 years of that. That's a federal program that's coming, and there's a lot of lobbying to look to have some type of funding to make this a little bit easier in different areas. I think we're going to see more of this happening. We're just coming out of this this disruption because of COVID. The government's very interested in seeing people get, particularly the federal government, and seeing people get back to work. And they see the combination of some types of green jobs helping that to happen. We had a program just recently that opened up for residences that want to do upgrades there. So we had the typical doors and windows and insulation, but they included solar panels, electric vehicle charging, batteries, things we'd never heard of before. So these would be things that electrical contractors would be installing as well. So you just have to look in the area that you're in Canada, and I think we're going to be seeing more of this. And it's perhaps, depending on what it is, the contractor that's in your area should be aware of what those are. Terry mentioned the ZVIP program. We're helping the customers of ours that are in a position to take advantage of this program. If you would see the work that we're doing at the moment, an enormous amount of work to help out our customers like Terry, to be able to assist their residents to be able to take advantage of this. The program's closing up very closely soon, June the 22nd, and we have nearly 200 people that we're assisting. So I was shocked with the uptake. But here's another situation where why can't the electrical contractor be able to help with that?
So it's another good question to ask when you're interviewing your potential contractor, is the extent to which they can help inform you on incentives. A question for all the panelists: what's the risk to condos that aren't being progressive in installing chargers? And I guess you could even apply this to businesses that potentially have retail and footfall traffic. Are they essentially devaluing their properties by not being progressive in actually laying down plans and starting to put in some chargers?
I was really hoping to hear Terry answer this, because Terry's really in touch with other managers. He works for a big management company, and I got a feeling he's a little quiet, but I got a feeling he could answer this quite nicely.
Well, personally, I'll say it personally, not from a company standpoint, but personally, the feedback I'm getting from my owners is that definitely it's going to make them more marketable when it's time to sell their suite. So I think it's a win. If you do it, you won't go wrong. That's my personal feeling. And I think it does enhance the cost. So, yeah.
And Melissa, what about from the contractor's point of view? Is there, if they don't have these skills and they're not actually being proactive in offering their clients these services, is there a risk that they're essentially devaluing their offering?
They are, and I would caution property owners, whether it's in the small condo industry or the larger industry or private homeowners. This is an energized product. It must be performed by law by an electrician, and it is critical to ensure that that you're using a contractor that has the proper credentials to be doing it. Being a licensed electrical contractor is absolutely essential, number one, and number two, having those that having employees that have actually gone through this professional development training just adds another layer of assurance. We are working through NETCO to promote our program quite heavily in the coming months, and we will be promoting it as well to insurance carriers. And I do caution folks, if you don't use a licensed electrician to be installing a charging station, whether it's at your home or in a condo unit, and there is an issue with it, then it has not been installed properly. And you may simply not receive any type of insurance coverage for that, because it is a compulsory occupation and you are required to use licensed contractors and electricians to do that work.
So pretty clear warning there for anyone who's thinking of installing their own charger at home.
Not a great idea. Plugging in a toaster is one thing, but actually building the toaster, wiring it, and then plugging in is another. Much different. So.
Cool. Well, a comment on charging speeds and levels. What if I want to? What if I want a level 3 charger in my condo? So a level 3 charger is the fastest kind of charger you can get, which is like also called a DC fast charger, which usually is sort of up from 50 kilowatts and above. Does that change the process or considerations for the building at all? So I think this is going to be one for Mark.
Okay, so this, not as often as some of the other questions, but this does come up. So let's keep in mind that whatever we put into a condo and it's getting paid for by the corporation needs to be available to everybody. So those of us in the industry understand that level 3 charging uses a certain various plugs to plug into the car, and not every car plugs in the same way. The Teslas are using a different means of connection. So if you were to put in a level 3 charger, you wouldn't be able to serve everybody in the community. I think that would be a problem. The other issue is, I think it's a misapplication, and this is where I think when you're reaching out to your electrical contractor, they should be able to say, where are we here? We're at a retail environment, a restaurant. There, a level 3 charger is a perfect arrangement, right? I'm planning to stay at the restaurant 45 minutes. I regain almost all my battery, and I pay $20 for a charge, and that sounds like exactly the right arrangement. A level 2 charger that's going to take 4 hours. I'm not quite sure whether that's a right application. When I'm at a condo where I'm living and I'm staying all night, it makes sense. And again, we're back into this cycling things in and out. Keep in mind, if I said it, these chargers can be easily $50,000 and needing quite a bit of infrastructure. And so it's not quite. And I will tell you, I know Nino, you and I we're in this. We get all these numbers: level 1, level 2, level 3. It all we know what it all is, and we're moving to be a little more careful. We're calling these level 3s DC fast chargers to be a little more clear about what it is. We have a video series. So one of the most popular video I have is this level 1, level 2, level 3. So that just gives you an idea in terms of education, which we were talking about at the top of the discussion. That is where people are. That is how much they understand in a lot of cases at this moment, and they're needing that kind of education. So you have to sometimes think about your audience and bring the conversation down to something that they can understand, and then work it up from there.
So we're not getting into obviously specific pricing in this discussion today, and that's obviously something you need to discuss with your contractor. But Mark, you referenced $50,000 and upwards for a DC fast charger. I just want to kind of sort of let the audience know that is for one of the very fast chargers, which is quite unusual for a condo or a business installation. The cost of what we would call a level 2, which is what you'd more typically find, is a lot less than that, or is that
much less? So we'll talk cost just for a minute if we want. So if somebody's getting a home charger, generally speaking, simply manages to get the electricity to the car. There's no level, generally speaking, no real level of control. There's no connection to the internet and what have you. And they can be had anywhere from, $800, $1,000, $1,200. They're available fairly reasonably. When you're starting into a network charger, this is the level 2 network charger. And we talk about level 2 just means that it's provided with power at 220 volts or 208 or 220. They're anywhere from $1,700 to $5,000 or $6,000, depending on how fancy it is. Ultimately, those 2 chargers would still put out the same amount of energy. So it just depends on what the exact application. So you can see there, if you're bumping up to a DC fast charge, something that you might have seen at a plaza or by the side of the road, these big boxes, clearly you understand that this costs quite a bit more. So everything in its right place.
Thanks, Mark. A question I think, Terry, you may well be best to answer. Is the charging infrastructure covered by condo insurance or owner insurance? Can condo charge the owner and collect incremental insurance, for example?
I'm not exactly certain about the insurance implications, but I know that any of the maintenance that needs to be done on the infrastructure is the owner's responsibility. So it'll be paid for by all the users.
So can I clarify just a little bit, Nino?
Please, yeah.
There's kind of 2 pieces. Sorry, is that okay?
Yeah, totally, yeah.
Yeah, okay. There's kind of 2 pieces. There's these panels and things that the corporation paid for to be put in. Those are where the electricity is coming from. Once they're paid for and they're in, they become part of the building, and Terry would maintain that in the same way that he maintains other panels, maybe a thermographic inspection once every 18 months or something of that nature. The charger itself was purchased and owned through an agreement to the owner. If that charger fails, something's wrong with it, it is not the responsibility of the corporation. It actually there was an agreement in place. It belongs to the resident, and the resident will take care of it like they would other things that are in their own suite. So I just to be clear about how it works in a condo. And condos are a special animal. That's why we have property managers.
Thanks, Mark. Melissa, for referencing the conversation we were having earlier about how Terry chose his vendor to his contractor, for contractors who are new to the field, Are there networking events or professional development opportunities with a networking component that contractors can engage in?
What I would highly suggest is connecting with the Electrical Contractor Association in your area. They are all affiliates of NETCO nationally. So when we host events or anything of that nature, we flush it down to them, and then it gets out to all the members within the organization. So we are planning to do quite a bit of development in this area. As I noted, we've received a substantive grant from the province of Ontario in particular. We're very active already in British Columbia through our affiliates there. We do a lot of training in the Western Canada, and it's really starting to progress in Ontario. And even on the East Coast, we just finished our first training session about a month and a half ago in Nova Scotia, and now we're moving it into New Brunswick and PEI as well. So.
Thanks, Melissa. A question I suspect is probably for Mark. In Ontario, we have the Class A Industrial Conservation Initiative Programme. Could a new large MERB, a multi-unit residential building with a 2 megawatt transformer, utilise the Class A programme to reduce the building's summer provincial peaks by using the EV batteries that are connected at the time of those peaks?
I think the complexity of this question is almost beyond me. I'm not quite sure what they're intending to do here. And you probably need some more information. This whole thing is evolving in terms of batteries, and Nino and I know in terms of the connection of the batteries to the property. So at some point, we're looking to be able to have what's called sort of a vehicle to grid or vehicle to home, so that we can have some connection and maybe have some resiliency through these. We're not quite there yet, but it's coming, and the industry is definitely looking at this whole ecosystem of electricity in general. It may not always be kind of like it is now. It's coming from one supplier through the wires to our home. Some of it, or to our buildings. Some of it might be developed actually at the building through solar. Some of it may be batteries that are being charged and providing for these off-peak arrangements. So this is definitely happening, but it's a bit more of a complex question. And again, I just don't think we're quite there yet.
So the vehicles are really just coming to the market now at scale, well, soon, that will have this more bi-directional energy capability. I think the questioner was referring to will be able to extract load. So yeah, just sort of adding to that point that hopefully it's coming, but we need vehicles, and also we need the management systems to accommodate it. Yeah,
I mean, we've had it with the Nissan Leaf for a long time, but that being said, it's fine that the car can do it. If you don't have the hardware and the charger or to bring it back in, that's another matter. We heard the announcement for the Ford F-150. We're talking about the idea of the F-150 actually supplying power to our house. Ford sounds very serious about this. That's a compelling and interesting vehicle. So the more of these kinds of things that happen, and in terms of newer, different vehicles and different price ranges with different options, that's what we're used to in the market anyways. That's going to draw. This is going to push this industry, whether it likes it or not. It's going to continue to move out. Imagine. I don't mean this to be an advertisement for Ford in any way, but it's this is a very popular vehicle, and there hasn't been anybody that's quite yet filled this niche. For us, it's always interesting. We're always intrigued at what's coming next, and we have our eye down a couple of years down the road all the time.
Yeah, I hear that the new Volkswagens and the new Hyundais will be empowered as well. Okay, a question. I'm a board member of an older building, 1974, shared electrical use. We were considering a pilot project of 20 EV spots, all costs charged back to the 20 participants. Each of those individuals would then be charged a per month flat fee for use. So this question from Mark or Terry. My question is whether or not that makes sense, and what would a feasible chargeback per month to cover, what would be a feasible chargeback per month to cover normal use? I know it's going to be tricky to give specific costing, but just on the principle of that, if that's feasible. Terry or Mark, I don't know.
Sorry, I'm gonna. This is a very common question. They would like. Sometimes the idea is, well, if I could just have a kind of a flat fee, then I don't have to have this third party doing this reading and what have you. And that will just kind of make everything easier. So I've been doing this for just in business 36 years, and particularly in the condo industry. There is going to come a moment, if you want advice for your condo, there is going to come, so the board agrees that it's okay, everybody will pay $50 a month. And maybe these 20 people also agree that $50 a month is okay. And then in time, the property manager changes, the board changes, the management company changes, people move in and out. I promise you, it will not be very long before somebody will come to me and say, I'm getting the short end of the stick. These people should be paying more. This person who has a smaller car is paying the same as my bigger car. And I promise you, you will not have any way to solve this until you meter this. So if that's a game plan, let's just meter it up front and get this out of the way. I think that they think there's going to be savings, but there isn't. Listen, reach out to us. Let us guide you through from the beginning to the end, and we'll help you. This is the question you just asked. Very common question.
And time's getting upon us, so this will be the last question. What's the risk of new vehicles coming to market that will require a different charger? So if you spend all this money getting chargers installed, but then is there a risk that you might not be able to use them in the future?
Nino, I think you could answer this. I think you could answer that this J1772 connector that everybody's agreed on is the way it's going to stay. I don't think there's going to be a new way to plug in, right, Melissa? Not a new way to plug in your toaster. Well, the toaster will always come with the same cord to match the same receptacle. This, I don't think that you have to worry about. Could there be other new technologies, this vehicle to grid, this information piece? For sure. But ultimately, plugging in and charging the car, I don't think it's changing.
Thanks, Mark, and I fully agree with that. Yeah, I think the adapter is going to be around for a very long time, and there's going to be the consistent connector. Well, as I mentioned, time is unfortunately upon us, and I'm sorry that we weren't able to get to all the questions. We tried to get to as many as we could, and as big a variety as we could. But thank you to the audience for the questions and for taking part. But a special thank you to our panelists for coming up and sharing the knowledge and expertise with us today. It's very much appreciated. If you'd like to find a contractor, you can go to poweringcommunities.ca, where you'll find a great bunch of resources. And I understand there's also an article on Mark in there as well. And also, as Melissa mentioned, you can go to the Netco. If you're a contractor, you can go to the Netco site, where you can register and obviously keep on top of the announcements about the forthcoming rollout of the programs. So a special thank you to the Electrical Contractors Association of Ontario and the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers for presenting this webinar today. We'll be sharing a link to a recording of this webinar in the next few days on electricalautonomy.ca, so you can share that or catch up with some of the questions there. Thank you all for joining us, and have a great rest of the day.